Hey everybody, I hope you're having a great day. We're going to do a little bit of a deep dive today. And it all stems from me playing with this ThingPulse device. And what I needed to do was I needed to make an API call. For those of you who don't know what an API call is, basically what happens is I visit a URL with this device, and in this situation it's Open Weather Maps. So I visit Open Weather Maps and I have my API key, which is unique to me. And then I tell them what I want back. And in this situation, I wanted the forecast because I was doing some other things. And basically when I do that, their web server returns a giant blob of text to me. And then it's my job to take that text and to parse it into something that's usable. So in other words, they'll send me that it's 79.37 degrees or 79.87 degrees, and I had to round it up to 80, and I had to, tell it that this was the percentage, and basically just work out this whole string. The problem is, well, there's several problems. One is making an HTTPS call, a secure call from one of these devices, uses, in this situation, in ESP8266, uses most of the RAM. In the case of our beloved Arduino Uno, it uses more RAM than the system has, and it's not even capable of making an HTTPS call. So that's one of the problems. The second thing is that you can do some paring down in your request, but basically the API sends so much information back that it overwhelms this thing's ability to process, and a lot of times it would crash, and on something like an Arduino Uno, every time it crashes because it just can't process the amount of information that the API wants to send back. And so we're going to take a little bit different of an approach, and we're going to make what I'm calling an API relay. And this will give us a ton of advantages. So because we're on our own network, and I'm going to stop for a second and say, I'm putting out another video called IoT Security for Idiots, and I'm going to explain a lot of these concepts in detail. So before you freak out, go watch that video. But basically what this will allow us to do is to make an HTTP call, which uses a lot less memory, on our own network. And then the server, the PHP file, the Raspberry Pi, whatever we use, is going to go out to the web. It's going to get the information from the API, and it's going to do what we call parsing it. And so it's going to do all the work to do all this conversion for us, and then it's only going to send us the information we need. And that's fantastic because this allows us to take our little Arduinos, our little ESP8266s, and use every bit of the memory for our purposes, not trying to whittle down all the information the API sends us. So I'm going to show you how to do this in a lot of different ways. I'm going to give you examples on how to do it on an ESP8266, an Uno, how to do it on an ESP32. I'm going to give you some examples of how to make an API relay in Node-RED and how to write one in PHP. Now, we're not going to go through every line of code in this video. I'm going to basically concentrate on doing it with the Uno in Node-RED, but I'm also going to provide the examples of how to do it on those other platforms so that you don't have to sit there and fiddle through it. So let's get started. Okay, so before we dig too much into the code, let's take a look at what we're trying to accomplish. So right now I have my Ethernet cable unplugged on my Arduino, and it's set to use Node-RED as an API relay. So I'm going to plug the Ethernet cable in, and in a few seconds we're actually going to make a call, and you'll see these nodes kind of flash around that something's happening, and you should see something pop up over here on the debugger. Okay, there we go. So we have it telling us that the weather outside is a clear sky and 66.11 degrees and 59% humidity. This is in New York, so we got a weird unexpected response there. But you'll see that what's happening is it's hitting this and it's getting this JSON array back. And so to give you an idea what's happening, and I'm going to stop it from firing off over and over again, so I'm going to close this out. What's happening is we set up one of these HTTP input nodes on Node-RED, and when you double click that, we're able to basically make our own little URL that we can call. And in this situation we use /API calls, and we're using get. It really doesn't matter for what we're doing now. But then that's going to pass into one of these HTTP requests. And what we're doing at that point is we're making an HTTPS call. Forget this thing down here. We've spent some time discussing that. But we're going to make an HTTPS request to this API, and we're saying that we want the forecast for this city ID, which happens to be New York, and then my code is after that. And so what we're doing, if we were to look at what that would give us back, I did this in the browser itself, you get this giant chunk of string. Now there are some things you could do to minimize this some. You could do weather, and there's some things you could do, but either way, you're going to get back way more information than what you want your little Arduino to process. So what I've done here is I've written a couple of functions. And in JavaScript, what I like to do is to flatten. And let me show you what's going on. So I've copied everything that I got in that test JSON response, and I'm going to paste this into this Prettyfire tool. And you're going to see that basically you get, this would be the first layer, and then you get this second layer here, and then you can get things in here, and the third layer. And this information is just all over the place in terms of levels deep. So, you know, you'd have to access it through just a bajillion different levels of parsing and stuff like that. So what I like to do, especially when I'm doing this in JavaScript, is I have two functions here that essentially are going to flatten this JSON out. So let me show you what that looks like. So what I've done in that function is, instead of having this multi-dimensional set of objects, I have gone in there and basically had it lower everything down to one level so that I could process it a lot easier. So if I want to know the temp, it's just this. And there are some things built into Node-RED that will do this, but they didn't work very well for me, so I just have my own functions in there. So basically what we're doing right now is these two functions are flattening out all of that JSON into this to make it easy to process. So now what I can do is essentially come in here, copy this, and then when I'm at the bottom of this function, I just create a new object, and I say that the temperature is data, which is coming from here where I'm taking that whole flattened thing, and I'm saying that I want list 0 main temp, and you can see list 0 main temp. And now what I'm doing is just assigning that object right here, that value right here, to this part of the object. And I'm doing the same thing with the weather and the same thing with the humidity, and then I turn it into a JSON string and return it. And so you can play around with that. I don't need to spend hours going over that on the video, but you can see over here that instead of that big blob of text, instead of this, now what I'm getting is temp is 65.89, weather is clear, and the humidity is that. And so I can go back to my Arduino sketch. All we're doing at this point is just extracting the values from the JSON string that we received. And you can see here doc weather is the same as weather over here. And so basically what I'm saying is the weather outside is currently, leaving a space, grabbing whatever JSON I was passed as weather, and then I'm going on to the next line and I'm saying the temperature is, I'm grabbing whatever was sent as temp, so temp right here, and then I'm going down and putting the little F after it and making a new line. So easy peasy, couldn't really be much easier. So right now you can see that the Arduino is happily getting the information from the API through this thing. As it comes in, you can see these little things light up and they're doing what they need to do, and not a problem. So, but if I were to come in here and remove this function that was stripping all that stuff out and just take the bare API call and send it in, you're going to see that this thing is going to run out of memory. And no matter how much I tweak the settings on that Arduino JSON, it's not going to have enough memory to process the information that this thing is getting. It's just going to say no memory. And that's kind of the best case scenario. A lot of times the things will stop looping, or they'll just throw all kinds of garbage on the serial monitor. So we've really accomplished two things by doing this. One, we turned this call that was an HTTP request into an HTTPS request. And the second thing we did was that we are only getting the information that we really need from the API and sending it on to the Arduino. And so we've saved memory two ways. We've saved it with the HTTP request, and we've saved it by only sending what we actually need. And so that is the point of the API relay. If we wanted to do the same thing on PHP, then we would comment this out and comment this in. And in my situation, I happen to have this file in a folder called 4414 because it's part of a UserSpice folder, and so I'm calling the file API relay.php on this IP address. So if I were to drag this in here, you can see that what I'm doing is a very simple, really 20 lines of PHP, 19 lines of PHP, and I'm setting a header. I'm giving it the API address with my key. You would put your own key in here. And then once I get the information back, 200 is a good response. Then I'm parsing that data. In this situation, like I'm rounding the temperature to 2 decimal places, setting the humidity, and then echoing it back out to the thing. And so very simple. And so I'm able to make an HTTPS request from here also and save every bit of memory that I could do, that I was able to do with Node-RED. So that is an API relay, and that is how to save you some RAM. Again, don't forget to check the description of this video for a link to all these sample code snippets and Arduino sketches. And thanks for watching.